Well, we are indeed blessed with a great many gifts in this congregation, and one of our traditions is having storytellers on Sundays throughout the year. And so today, as we have gathered here, we are going to be gifted some stories of new life, as is part of our Easter theme. And so I would like to first thank our storytellers and appreciate all you have to share with us, and would like to invite Dr. Sandy Gahn up. Oh, Suzanne goes first. Okay. Well, who's next then? And then Carla. Okay, now I know. All right, would you please come up and share with us? Surprise.
This story is set on 3 continents. It begins at Mountain Rise United Church of Christ in Fairport, New York, with a group of 10, 7 teenagers and 3 adults. We arrived in Santa Ana, El Salvador, where we were met by staff from ASOPASAR, the NGO Rural Health and Empowerment of the Poorest in each community. They do great work, including staffing an eye clinic and hospital, and they serve street children. We North Americans were divided into 2 groups. My initial assignment was at the Barefoot Angels site, with 1 teacher and a cadre of volunteers. Approximately 70 children would come and go, receiving basic education and emotional psychological support. Some of these children had families. Many did not. Too many lived on the streets, taking care of the toddlers and babies of prostitutes, hiding from gangs who would enslave them. Signs of new life from the Barefoot Angels. Someone would sing or play music, and the children would dance with pure joy. They taught us the Salvadoran version of the chicken dance. They liked being teacher. One day we were visited by a large flight of yellow butterflies flying over the heads of the children. This was especially poignant as our devotional the night before had centered on butterflies. Please remember this reference. Youth had a private space for group sessions with volunteer counselors where they could tell their stories. This peer group would constantly say, "Be strong, have courage." It was estimated that 1 barefoot angel is raped each day. Be strong. Have courage. I was given permission by the youth to sit in on one of these sessions. The arrival of 11-year-old Norma with her 5-year-old sister and 2-year-old cousin is a memory that has lasted. Tired, dirty, and sick, Norma sent the 5-year-old inside for school while she stripped the 2-year-old and washed her underwear, the child's only article of clothing. Then the 2-year-old was placed in that same soapy water in the outside concrete basin and given a bath. Norma put the child on the ground where she wailed. I found an old t-shirt, wrapped the child in it, and cradled her like an infant, sang her to sleep, and held her until Norma, rested, clean, and in clean clothes, collected her charges and departed. Too young to be a mama, Norma did the best she could for her family. This was a great challenge for me in my privilege. It makes so much difference where you are born. A book could be written about these children, but there are more children to remember, as 6 years later I take 3 flights to Johannesburg, South Africa, with a group of New York clergy to learn and work with a faithful group, including missionaries, local volunteers, and Fundisi clergy. We learned some basic Zulu and struggle with the Xhosa language of the Eastern Cape. We learned facts and figures, met some incredibly brave, hardworking people, and had our impressions of African AIDS turned upside down. Some things that stuck with me. The beauty of the African savanna with trees of purple and pink and a sun that creates incredible artwork in its setting and then falls out of the sky. Go-go's or grannies who are raising grandchildren, their own and those of others, because the children's parents are late, having died from AIDS. When there are no more go-go's, the children group together and live on the streets, under a bridge, or in an abandoned building. Traveling in the back of a bucky, a well-named pickup, with 5-gallon containers of soup, we visit homes where a dish and cloth cover are waiting for our arrival. The very ill get this soup with a vitamin packet added. After receiving consent, we sing and pray with the person with AIDS and their caregiver. Some of the homes are way back in the mountains, and the soup has to be hand-carried in. Antiviral medications are available, but may be refused because of the stigma or distrust of Western medicine. Also, many ill people don't have the bus fare to visit a clinic or the strength to stand in line for hours. Several of the churches help with this. Our lodging changed frequently, and one night we stayed in a prison. This was a challenge, but it was a place with plumbing. Outside the prison, in the middle of nowhere, is a very high electrified fence, not to keep the prisoners in, but to keep the wild animals out. Because we arrive late at night, the stars are magnificent, and I realize how far away I am from home as I see the Southern Cross. Visiting a congregational church in Groutville, an all-Zulu church of 1,500 plus outstations, it looks like it was plucked right out of New England. While there, we learn about Chief Alfred Lutuli and visit his gravesite. I wrote down a partial quote from him, and I quote, "As an African, I worship the God whose children we all are. I do not see why it should be otherwise," end quote. In 1961, Lutuli was the first African to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. Siyabathanda, we are loving them, is the name of an orphanage where there are empty beds because of the vast disparity between government regulations and what is needed. The government does not want the stigma of AIDS orphans, and there are never enough social workers to place them. But there are unsanctioned orphanages in Zululand. We attended many meetings and times of worship, often running late as time is quite fluid where we visited. After walking up a mountain road, communion was shared in a tiny open-air church. We then got back on a bus and traveled about 2 hours to another church where people were waiting for us. We were 3 hours late, and these folks were waiting in a building without heat or plumbing. Many of them had walked for miles to get there. These generous folks sang and danced and prayed for us, and then began their trek home in the dark. Toward the end of our journey, we were offered overnight hospitality by church members. Our wonderful barefoot hostess provided a room for ladies with 4 beds and a potty, so we wouldn't have to find our way to the outhouse in the darkness. Everywhere we went was very cold, and there is no indoor heat. And it snowed that night. As we were leaving another late night meeting, we were being escorted out to our transportation, and one of our New York groups started singing, Sia Bahamba Kukilyen Kwenkos, We Are Marching. You can find it in the New Century Hymnal. Our hosts were astonished that we knew their song, and we sang it over and over and departed with hugs and tears. My last mission trip was to a sister church in Honduras. The church Viviendo en Amor y Fe, Living in Love and Faith, is in Tegucigalpa, one of the 2 capital cities in Honduras. This little family church started a health clinic, a library, and a church school. In a part of the city that is surrounded by gangs, it is a beacon of hope and peace. On our last night together, we were celebrated with food, song, and dancing. A 9-year-old with impeccable manners asked me to dance with him. As the dance ended, Juanito escorted me back to my seat and bowed and said, Muchas gracias, Señora Susana. Via con Dios. I would like to end this story by asking you to remember the reference to butterflies winging their way around the heads of the barefoot angels. This poem was sent to me by one of my daughters before that Salvadoran trip. The child whispered, God, speak to me. And a meadowlark sang. The child did not hear. So the child yelled, God, speak to me. And the thunder rolled across the sky. But the child did not listen. The child looked around and said, God, let me see you. And a star shone brightly. But the child did not notice. And the child shouted, God, show me a miracle. And a life was born. But the child did not know. So the child cried out in despair, touch me, God, and let me know you are here. Whereupon God reached down and touched the child. But the child brushed the butterfly away and walked away unknowingly. Sometimes God speaks to us in voices of Spanish, Zulu, or Xhosa. Sometimes God appears with a hand of peace. Sometimes God touches us with the brush of butterfly wings. But we must pay attention and know that moments of new life surround us. And for all of that, we must be grateful. Amen.
Thank you, Suzanne, for your words of witness and hospitality and the ways in which God is at work in and through us throughout our world. I would like to invite Carla to come up and to share your story with us.
Good morning. I feel like I should be like, Estelle Getty and say, picture this. But this is a true story. In 1996, we lived beside the Tuskegee National Forest in Tuskegee, Alabama. We lived in a beautiful little parsonage by the church that Ken was serving at the time. Our daughter Kendra and her husband and 2 boys, ages 3 and 5, lived down the road from us. We had a wonderful time being grandparents to these little boys. They rode their big wheels around the church and the parking lot and down a big hill behind our house. They were hard-riding, fun-loving little boys. Life was good. Then Kendra got pregnant with a girl, and we were all thrilled to have a new little one in the house. In our midst, Kennedy Taylor Pratt. She was a beautiful brown-haired, brown-eyed baby with a smile that could light up the room. Kendra and family went to church every Sunday, and everyone wanted to hold her and make over her, kind of like we did last week with Messiah, and she became the church's baby. One Sunday after church, we were invited to friends at a church member's house, to lunch at a church member's house. And our daughter Kendra and her family went home, and she got invited to an Auburn basketball game. So her husband stayed with the kids, and she went off to the basketball game. Leighton is his name. He put Kennedy down for a nap and let her cry herself to sleep. But when he went to check on her, she was blue. He immediately started CPR and called 911. He sent the boys next door to get the neighbor to help, but next door wasn't close because we lived in the country and their little legs could only go so fast. But by the time the neighbor got there, the EMTs had arrived. They continued CPR and drove her to Auburn, which is about 31 miles from Tuskegee. And at the hospital, they pronounced her deceased with sudden infant death syndrome, more commonly known as SIDS. Another friend tried frantically to reach Kendra. In those days, we didn't have cell phones. So she drove to Auburn to try to flag her down because she figured the ball game was about over and that she would be coming back towards Tuskegee. So she tried flagging her down and did reach her and drove her immediately to the hospital, telling her that Kennedy had been taken there. I was waiting at the front door, and when she asked how she was, I didn't have an answer because I didn't want to be the one to say she's dead, Kendra. When I couldn't answer, she knew the worst, and she let out a howl that you can only imagine. Every time I see a TV show where someone is notified of a death, I relive that horrible moment. Life went on after the funeral, but Kendra wasn't the same. She just walked through the motions and grieved. I tried to give most of my attention to the boys because they were caught in the middle. She and Leighton later moved to Montgomery, Alabama, and bought a house, and she started a job at a Baptist church there as a secretary. She remained somber, but slowly came back to life. She found out about a group called Compassionate Friends, which is for people, mostly parents and siblings, who have lost loved ones. She heard awful stories of other people's tragedies and learned that others had their own experience with grief. She made lifelong friends in that group. She later accepted the position of leadership when asked to be a moderator. She went to the National Convention, and she still tries to educate everyone she knows about SIDS. She became a good speaker and was able to recognize talents that she didn't even know she had. The moral of this story is that even the worst day of your life, there can be newness with God. I believe she became the caring and compassionate person she is today because she walked on the dark side and came through with God's grace. So when you are at your darkest hour, look towards the light and ask, what am I to learn from this? And let God bring new life to you.
Thank you, Carla, for those words of courage and hope. Sandy, thank you for coming and sharing your story.
one more story. So I want to tell you about my life. When I was a freshman in college at Iowa State University, I met a guy. He was a really nice guy. He was tall, good-looking, fun to be with. We were both young and thin back then. Doug had long black hair. Now he's mostly bald, and I was all blonde. He was 2 years older than me and eager to marry. I had barely turned 21 when we married. As I look back now, I was book smart, but terribly naive about my own sexuality. I did what was expected of me. I went to college, got married, changed my name to his, and went with him when he moved for his career. We were both from Iowa, but we moved around a lot and ended up in Maryland, Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska for his career progression. We had a good relationship. As I said, he was a nice guy. He is a nice guy. He worked hard and had a good sense of humor, and we got along well. I pursued an academic career. I went to school for a master's degree and eventually a PhD. We were together for 20 years. It was somewhere between Kansas and Nebraska that I finally came out to myself. I finally recognized that I was attracted to women and that there was a name for what that was. I honestly had not put two and two together until it hit me one day that I was a lesbian. Denial is a powerful thing. But what was I going to do about it? The change from straight to not straight is hard, and it was more so back then. What would my family and friends think of me? Would they stop loving me? Also, I felt I made a commitment to Doug. I'd made a vow. I had lots of conversations with God. I kept telling God I wasn't going to break my vows. We were both church-going people. Our faith journeys were important to both of us. In my conversations with God, it was clear to me that God wanted me to be authentic about who I was. At that time, most churches were anti-gay. I knew other people who were mistreated by their churches. I knew of religious leaders who came out and lost their jobs in the Lutheran and Methodist churches, both of which I had attended. But I discovered I couldn't fight God's wishes for me. I kept saying no to God. I didn't want to face the hostile world. I wasn't coming out. I'd made a vow and I was sticking to it. And God kept telling me, you have to be true to yourself. I kept refusing. It was too hard. You can probably guess which of us won that argument. Here's what finally happened. Doug got a new job in Nebraska. My eyesight was greatly destroyed by multiple eye surgeries and multiple retina tears. I left a job I loved in Kansas City and a great bunch of friends. I moved to a new city where I didn't know a soul except Doug. Then my grandfather died, and then my 20-year-old cat and constant companion died. I didn't have a job and wasn't sure I could get one with my limited vision. I was mentally lost. I didn't even know who I was. I couldn't take any more loss. It seemed like God had said, now you have to do something, but I want you to be who I made you to be. I went to a therapist and I finally came out to her. I still remember a conversation we had. I told her my life was as I knew it was washing away in a flood, a broken dam. The therapist said, "What happens after a flood?" I said, "It's all gone. Everything will be destroyed." She said, "And then what?" All I could see was the destruction. She kept prodding me. Finally, I said, "Well, I guess the floodwaters recede eventually, and things do start to come back to life. A resurrection of a sort." That's exactly what I needed to hear at the time. So I came out to Doug. He was gracious and kind, as I knew he would be, but I'd really rocked and wrecked his world. We had the weirdest divorce. We went to court, as was required by Nebraska law. We both told the judge we wanted to end our marriage. There were no fights over anything, no children, equal division of assets. After court, we went to lunch, then we went to a movie, then we went to dinner, and finally, we went our separate ways. We moved on. I told my family one by one. That was the first hurdle the second hurdle and resurrection. My family didn't reject me, though some of my friends did. I found a new job in Des Moines, where my two sisters live. I found a group of women, friends, and started to live my new life. I met Kathy, who had recently come out of a long marriage too. We started dating, and I started attending this church with her. We've been together now for over 20 years. Doug processed our divorce by having his own conversations with God. When his world was shaken, he turned to his faith for answers and ended up going to seminary. Doug and I are still friends. Doug and Kat, I skipped a minute, his world was shaken. He became a Methodist minister. He remarried and has been with Ann for over 20 years too. And we're still friends. Doug, Ann, Kathy, and I get together every once in a while. Ann's life changed too. She left a bad marriage and ended up going to seminary too. She became a pastor. They live in Lawrence, Kansas now. So here was a resurrection, a new life for all of us. Ann left an abusive husband, met Doug, and found a new life direction. Doug got a new wife, a new career in the church, and an instant family because Ann had 3 children. Kathy found a new partner. I was finally able to be myself, to find a new set of friends, to marry Kathy and become an active member of this church. We've made a good life together. God got to say, "I told you so." There was a plan I didn't know about after the flood hit my life. New life, new growth, resurrection. And I don't argue with God anymore because God is good. and all the time. Let us celebrate new life.